debate. He mentioned on four main aspects of the um, four main aspects that we should be taking consideration of, and this is the stakeholders that we've mentioned earlier on. First of all, you talk about social impact, socially, economically, religion-wise, and yeah, one more which I forgot. But these are the few stakeholders that are affected if we are going to alter status quo um, in a debate. So yeah, make sure you introduce your stakeholders, your first speakers of each side, introduce your stakeholders, tell them why are you fighting for them, why are these stakeholders vulnerable because of the motion, and why your side better take care of them in the long run when the debate passes, when the motion passes or is rejected. Okay, so that's mainly how you come up with arguments, and then once you come up with arguments, this is where you will start to ask how do you elaborate on arguments, right? So a few things to note of is, for example, if you watch the debate coaching session that was held last week, we had a thing called RL, AREL, which is RL, which stands for assertion, reasoning, example, and linkage. These are the main things you will have to consider when giving out your arguments. So first of all, you have to be assertive with the argument that you laid out. After that, you have to reason out why this argument is true. So the reasoning aspect, it can be can be leveled, because once you ask why, there's always another why to it, right? For example, you say animal has rights. Why do animals have rights? Why do animals have rights? Why are these rights important? There's a lot of why layers that you can ask, but it's important to know your boundaries so that you don't talk about something that is not related to the motion at all. So this is reasoning, which is the main part of your argument. And then we have examples. This is where you provide examples, maybe real case examples or scenarios that you think would happen if the motion were to be passed or rejected. And then lastly, linkage. This is very important because once you've talked quite a while on your particular argument, you want to make sure that it still links back to the motion at hand and how it affects the stakeholders that you have chosen in the debate. So these are the main things that you have to take care of, take in consideration of when it comes to argument. Just keep asking yourself questions as you talk, because in a debate, it's not possible that you can, write down all your points, memorize them. If this is not the ideal way of debating, it's better if you know your arguments you know your arguments, you know why your arguments are important, then you're able to portray it more effectively and in a more convincing manner, basically. Yeah, so this is about arguments. And then lastly, will be on rebuttals. So rebuttals are basically counter arguments. So when a opposite team raise arguments, you will always have questions or rebuttals towards those arguments. This is what makes a debate. This is what a debate is, because without rebuttals, it would just be a public speaking competition. So you want to make sure that there is continuous engagement throughout the whole debate, throughout the 6 speeches. You want to make sure that there is engagement between both sides, so that you're actually exchanging opinions. So rebuttals will be done by 5 out of 6 of the speakers. Mainly the prime minister will be excluded from this because they will be the ones speaking first, so they will have nothing to rebut against. However, the subsequent speeches will include rebuttals, and then the third speaker of each team, which are the opposition whip and the government whip, will base their speech solely on rebuttals and rebuttals alone. So rebuttals are basically counter arguments. So how do you come up with rebuttals, right? So I've also mentioned this in the video. So if you ever feel like you need to get back a few tips and tricks, you can always go onto our YouTube channel. So how do you come up with rebuttals? So as I said earlier, in an Asian parliamentary debate or in a British parliamentary debate, you will always be given time to prepare for the motion before you actually debate. So this is where you can think of, the possible arguments that the opposite side might bring up, and then you find a way to counter it immediately. So this is what we did with our debate earlier on with BAC, with Taylor's. We have a mock debate night. So the mock debate. So this is where we try to think of what is the other side going to say? What is BAC going to say? And then we try plan ahead, and we counter those arguments, so that we have those counters ready in the case they raise that motion, so raise that argument. So it'll be very easy for us to just counter it with what we already have. However, this will not be the case because some teams are very unpredictable, and this will be more argument. So what you would have to do is, most of the time you would have to draft your counter arguments or your rebuttals during the debate itself, while you are listening to the opposite side speech. This is where you're going to like write down all their points and try to think of rebuttals. It might seem very stressful, but it's actually not. So what you guys can do is, you guys can always take into consideration your side of the debate. If the rebuttal is directly clashing with your arguments, it will be very easy for you to rebut, because you can always re-strengthen your arguments that you have mentioned earlier. However, if the argument that they bring up is something very new and something that you might be a bit like doubtful of, always link it back to your side of the debate. You can always concede if the argument from their side is very strong and there is nowhere for you to like rebut it, or very truistic, basically. You can always concede, but tell us why our side or your side is ultimately better at the end of the day. It's not wrong for you to say, yes, we do agree that this is going to happen, but we believe that under our side, where we cater to these stakeholders using better methods and mechanisms, this will be better. This will still, at the end of the day, it will still be better for them. Whereas under your side, you are not doing anything for these stakeholders. So always try to mention the best case scenario and worst case scenario. You can always concede if there is no way around it. You can always agree with the opposition's point, but always prove why your side is, at the end of the day, always better. So yeah, this is basically on best case scenario and worst case scenario. You can always say things like, okay, best case scenario, let's say this argument is true, this will happen. However, what if like the worst case? So this is where engagement comes in. You don't want to be the team that, no, we don't agree with your side. This is a team where you don't engagement, you're just refuting what the opposite side says. So by providing best case and worst case scenarios, you're actually making some sort of engagement and debate, because you are conceding to their points, but you're telling us why that point will not stand at the end of the day. Why? Because your points will ultimately be better. So this form of engagement is good. It shows that you as a team are not so stubborn, because some teams are very stubborn. They are very, they're very they have very strong opinions. So basically they really think that their side is the best, so they will not accept any other arguments. They will just tell you that you guys are wrong, regardless of what your points are. So by engaging and telling the adjudicators why the other team, yes, your point might be true, but at the end of the day, we still win this debate. This would be a better form of engagement. It shows that you are a team that actually listens and try to engage in the debate, because we don't want a team where you just either you ignore the arguments that are brought up by the opposite side, or you just tell us why is it false. But in the case that it is false, tell us why and provide solid arguments. But if you really can't think of any way around a particular, just concede to it, but just re-strengthen your points and tell us why that argument actually doesn't matter. It can also be achieved under our side, or it is just ultimately better for the stakeholders under our side. So there's no like standard procedures on how you can rebut, like how we can do for arguments, because it's something you have to do on the go. It's something you have to continuously think about. So I suggest, yeah, this actually comes with training. Not only training, but like just day-to-day conversations. When you talk with your friends, when you disagree on something, you will always come with arguments. It depends on what type of person you are when it comes to day-to-day conversation. You can either be that person who says, no, it's not true, it's what I believe in. Or you can be that person who tells you it's not true because if it's true, I still agree with my points because blah 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 blah. So it comes with like just conversations, or being well read on the matter at hand. This is what helps you form arguments And yeah, there's no standard procedure. You just have to be very comprehensive. You have to know how to comprehend the arguments coming up from the opposite side and try to take them down. Try to take them down basically. Yeah, so this is all for rebuttals, arguments, and the overall introduction to Asian parliamentary debate. I will now pass the time to Vatika. If you have any other questions, do type it on the chat box. I will reply it during the session later on. So yeah, I'll pass it to Vatika to continue on with the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Irvine, for such a brief and very much in depth. Although it was very brief, it was very much in depth, and I think all of us really benefited from those few points that you mentioned. And as he mentioned, it's all there in our YouTube videos. So go ahead, watch. They're very short though. Like they're just bite-sized content. So like while you're doing your maybe homework, or you need something for background music, just kind of play them and see what we're saying about argumentation, also about rebuttals. And there's a very interesting video on how to fake confidence by our events manager Adam, who will be joining us later in this session. So go ahead, have a look at those videos. So I kind of prepared slides, but I'm having problems presenting the screen. So I'm just briefly going to touch everything that was there in my slides. So I'm basically going to be touching upon persuasive argumentation and also body language. So Irvine actually touched a little bit upon persuasive argumentation. My job was actually just to include Subha, the upcoming debates are in British Parliamentary, but the debate-thon event, it's not in either of them. It's just a random format that we made. It's just 4 versus 4 debate. The debate-thon event is structured in a different way. So it's just 4 versus 4, and then you go back, forth, back, forth. The rules will be given to you if you sign up for the debate. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm going to touch upon persuasive argumentation and body language. Now, the thing about body language is that I feel that it is actually secondary in debate. Because you're focusing on debate, it's actually secondary. Your main focus should actually be on your arguments and the points that you present. The matter of it should be solid. Only then do you move on to focusing on your body language and etc. etc. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is persuasive argumentation. Now, these things are actually taken from my psychology slides, like legit. I've just copied them off my psychology slides because we did this talk on persuasive argumentation just last week. So I thought it'd be really interesting if I present it in my training session. So research has shown that basically, so this was a research done in Yale, and some researchers were able to show that persuasive argumentation basically just boils down to 3 points. It is dependent on the source or the communicator, that is us, the person who's saying the message itself, which is the content. As I said, it should be the main focus in debate. And third is the audience. Now, what we basically mean by source, message, and audience is that the source should have, let's say there's someone of status telling you something. You're more likely to believe it than someone who you just
Vertica, you muted.
Yeah, I think someone muted me. Okay. So yeah, if you don't like listening to my voice, I'm sorry. You can just mute the meeting, but don't mute me, okay? Because yeah, I still need to give in the session. So yeah, what I was saying is what we mean by this source, the communicator, is that a person who's of higher authority has an advantage of persuading people. But then the second point boils down to message. As I said, that should be the main focus in your debate. When you go on, you should have points prepared. You should have thought about what the opposition is going to present, so that you have rebuttals for it. As Irvine said, that you should be able to predict and kind of gain a holistic view on the topic, so that your message itself is strong. Now, in the message itself, we actually have a lot of debates that focus around topics that are very sensitive. Just last week, as I said, what we learned in psychology is that fear communication has its own disadvantages. So let's say the topic is something about global warming, right? There's a topic about global warming versus global poverty in debateton. So when you start off by saying that the world is ending and you'll all not be left in like 20 years, you need to save the world, you say all those things to kind of scare the audience so that your point actually comes across and you feel that it'll become stronger. But sometimes those things don't actually work in real life. So what happens is that there are two ways. What research has shown is that when how you say things is very, very dangerous. Let's say you say the world is going to end, so that's like high. So in that high fear condition, people are more likely to ignore it. Why? Because they feel that it endangers them. They feel very anxious at that point and they feel that it's better to ignore it and they avoid it altogether. So if you develop an argument that is very fearful, that actually induces a lot of fear in the audience, it might as well not go by that well as you had thought, because it kind of leads to avoidance in the audience. While on the other hand, if you have an argument that is very low in fear, you say that, oh, okay, global warming has these effects and it's affecting countries, but we have time and we can improve the situation. So that's like a low fear message that you're putting across. And probably in that case, what happens is that the audience feels that it's not a very important topic anymore. I mean, sure, we have time to improve it, so we'll just improve it later on. We don't need immediate attention to it. So that's what happens in very low fear and very high fear conditions. So what research has suggested that when you frame arguments, it's best to have something that induces moderate fear. Like, don't say the world is ending and you're going to die tomorrow, but something like we're slowly progressing towards it and we need to act right now, something like that, something framed in a more neutral way. So that's about the message. So I explained about the source, the communicator, the message, and the third is the audience. Now, some of the debates that we do actually touch upon very sensitive issues. Like we had a debate against tailors on religion. And that was a very sensitive issue because some people really tend to get offended by it very, very easily. So what you kind of need to make sure is that your message actually delivers well to the audience. You need to think ahead about the audience that you're going to have. Are they like academic, or are they like very intellectual, or are they just laymen? So like when you're touching upon a topic of global, you can't just assume that everyone knows everything about global warming. You might go rambling on about terms in global warming and all those bigwig words, but people might not even understand it if you're delivering it to a common audience. And I think that's something that happens a lot in debates. People go rambling on about like big words, and then they don't really, people can't really grasp what's happening. People don't know the context behind it. So that's something that you really need to take care of. Just make sure that you know your audience well. You know the kind of audience you're delivering to, and your points are framed accordingly. So basically what I've explained so far is just summed up in one sentence. So who says what to whom and with what effect? This if you actually take into consideration this sentence while you're preparing your points, I think you'll be well ahead in front of everyone to actually explain your points and kind of frame your points in a more persuasive way. So that is a bit I had on persuasive communication or argumentation. Irvine already touched on that. So I just presented a little bit of psychology research, but now I think something that really interests me, and now this is basically more towards public speaking and not specifically focused on debate. Something that you actually take care of while you're going ahead and speaking in front of a large audience, or even like virtually in front of all these people that you're going to face in debates. Something that's really important and that might as well speak louder than your argument that you're presenting is how you actually present those things. You might have noticed that by now when I speak, I kind of move my hands a lot because that's just how I talk, and that's something that comes in very naturally to me. And that is actually a very key point of body language, moving your hands. But then there are a lot of components that go into body language. So a few things that you need to take care of. So when you go on the stage, you know your points, you know what you're going to do, you know your audience by now, you've considered everything. But now when you're on the stage, there are a few things that can happen. Either it can go the right way or the wrong way. Now, as it is, when you go on stage, you're going to have anxiety. You're going to, face so many people, and you're going to be like, oh no, I don't even know if I can do this. And I mean, that's completely normal, because it's been like 7 years since I've been public speaking and debating. So my focus is not only debating, but public speaking. I got into a debate like very recently, like 2 or 3 years ago in my high school. But before that, I usually just focused on public speaking, like elocution and, jams and all of those things. And I plan to have a very fun game probably next semester on just public speaking, not particularly focused on debate. So some things that I've learned through the years is that body language might as well make you win a public speaking competition, even when your points are just random, and they might not even be pieced together, but the way you say it and how you actually put your points across will actually make all the difference. Now, the thing that has actually worked out for me well, but I really don't recommend it. It's that we have a thing where I used to debate. I started my elocution and public speaking journey in India, and in India, basically, you cannot actually go ahead and read from a paper. You have to cram every single point. You just can't say anything. And in fact, if you have a paper, your points are going to be deducted because they feel you're not confident enough and all of that. I really wouldn't recommend this in debate, because you really need to note down your rebuttal points and everything. But if you go for public speaking, it's actually a good thing if you memorize your whole debate. Now, the thing is, when you memorize your whole debate, so the first speaker can actually do this, by the way. The first speaker is the only one who can do this, and the other speakers can do this for about 4 or 5 minutes. When you memorize your whole speech, when you're going to any public speaking competition, what it shows is that you are confident, you know your points, you know what you're putting across, and then you kind of also move your attentional resources from focusing on the paper and reading out the points to your body language. So that's, one thing off your head then. So you don't have to focus on looking at your paper, going through the points, all of that. It's all in your head. And then after that, you just focus on your body language. You go on the stage, you stand straight with your shoulders broad, and kind of just portray confidence in the way that even if you don't know anything, people should feel that you know what you're doing, you know all your points, all of that, right? So go ahead, and then you stand straight with your shoulders broad and kind of in a very straight posture, and with your hands to the side, or just like this somewhere, so that it's easy for you to move them. Apart from that, something that is very key is eye contact. Now, there are a few tricks that I said helps in eye contact. Now, you may realize that when you go on stage, there are a lot of things that you have to focus on. You have to focus on your speech. If you don't have it prepared, you have to focus on holding the mic, holding the paper. You have to focus on your hand gestures. So it might seem like a lot, but then all I'm saying is it really comes by practice. You have to go on practicing. It wouldn't come in like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. It might even take years. So, but this is actually the right time to start. I mean, this is how you get your training to the presentations in the corporate world, or debates if you want to carry it on later on. So it's the right time to start. It may take time, but don't give up in between. So when you go on stage, the thing with eye contact is that there's some tricks that people say work. Although I haven't tried this technique, but they say that if you move your eyes in a Z motion, like you go towards this corner, then come here, then go here. If you move towards it in a Z motion, kind of the audience feels that all of them have kind of had a fraction of your eye contact. This technique is said to work, but the thing is, I haven't used it because I used some other technique. What I've used from the beginning is that because it's very common to get anxious when you go on stage. So when I go on stage, whenever I'm giving any speech or debating, everything kind of blurs. Like I can't see anyone that's actually sitting in front of me. So even if it's my friend sitting in the first row, I wouldn't be able to make out the face. So I kind of try to blur the audience so that it kind of doesn't intimidate me, because you realize when you go on stage, right, people are going to have a variety of reactions to your arguments, and that distracts you so much you'll feel like you're not doing the right thing. And people are very good at this, let me tell you. People are so good at bringing you down when you actually go on stage and you give a speech. People will give you all sorts of reactions like, oh my god, this girl doesn't know what she's doing. They'll give you all those reactions, and you feel so intimidated by them. So what I try is that I blur out the audience completely. I actually cannot see I don't know how this comes by naturally to me, but I'm just suggesting it if you all want to try it. But go on stage and kind of don't focus on anyone that's there, so that you can't see their facial expressions and it doesn't intimidate you. And then since you can't see anyone, just kind of try move your eyes around as you would do naturally, and that feels you're actually kind of engaging the audience. So that's a bit about eye contact. A few other points that I want to touch upon. Yeah, I have touched upon the hand movements. They're very, very important, especially in debate. Now, movement is something. Yeah, it's more towards public speaking, but it's good if you use it in debate when you're having physical debates. Kind of move around to show that, okay, so if there's a large stage, right, like imagine the biggest lecture halls in our campus. So let's say you're giving a speech there. Obviously, there's going to be a podium, but for audience engagement, it's recommended that you actually move around this stage and kind of not use the stationary mic that's given to you on the podium. Although some of the debate tournaments that you take, might have a fixed rule of debating on the podium or whatever. But if you can, and if you're given the opportunity, please try to move around the stage. Now, apart from eye movement, this is also a key part of audience engagement. When you move around the stage, basically, people feel that you're actually giving attention to this part, also this part, like all parts of the audience, right? Because you're kind of moving around and trying to make contact with everyone. And the thing with eye contact is that the only thing you need to make sure with eye contact is that your eyes are not facing downwards. As long as you're looking straight, right, people would feel that they have your eye contact, even if they wouldn't have your eye contact. So it's just kind of playing around with eye contact and moving around to engage the audience. Now, expressions and mannerisms, they kind of tie in with my point of voice modulation. Now, this is something that even I struggle with after all these years. The thing with voice modulation is it comes by practice, and like by a lot of practice. So you kind of have to make sure that when you present your points, especially when you're debating on topics that are very sensitive, let's say you're debating on global warming, you kind of want to go to highs and lows. So you want to say something like, ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that in 20 years, we might all be extinct? Human species as a whole could be extinct. You see that the voice modulation where it goes, you kind of go high and then you go low. I kind of face problems with my lows because I just keep going to a high pitch when I'm speaking, but when you go towards a low pitch, you should have points that actually induce fear, as I explained. Maybe something like we're all going to be extinct. Say it in a low tone, right? So that's a bit about. Kang, you can find the disclaimer form. Okay, if you scroll up, you'll find the link to that. Maria can send it again. So that's a bit about body language and voice modulation. I feel voice modulation comes very gradually, so don't worry about it at all. But you should basically focus on your hand gestures, your moving around, all of that when you go to debate. That's about it from my side upon body language. Is there anything you'd like to add, Irvine?
No, everything's good.
Okay, cool. So whoever's left in this session, we actually kind of planned a debate later on the Paris Agreement. I am wondering if you all would be interested. and we can start debating on it. Probably not a very structured debate because we don't have that many people here. There are like 7 of us. But if you could kind of go ahead and explain what your stance is on the Paris Agreement. Anyone, literally. Just unmute yourself and go ahead. Irvine, what are your thoughts?
I'm actually not very I'm not very familiar with the Paris Agreement, but I know it's on something along the lines of a initiative by United Nations to combat climate change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So perhaps someone just like briefly tell us what the Paris Agreement is and what it mainly is about. Then we can try say whether or not we agree or we disagree with the Paris Agreement on how it combats climate change. Because I'm not sure of the details of the agreement. Does anyone know? You can just unmute your mic or type it in the chat box.
I'm not entirely sure because I didn't really get time to prepare, but then it was like around 2015 or 16, and people got together, like countries came together to realize that we have to cut down fossil fuels, and like the industries need to be monitored so that we can make sure we don't really let our earth go to rust or something. So basically they make sure they all promise to work harder, and it was effective since 2016, I think. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So we have to like say whether it was an effective agreement between the countries or whether it was just a promise which went to waste.
Yep. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, so all I know is that most countries joined, but United States went out. Like yeah, they just went out fully, like just a few days ago.
Oh wow, okay.
Donald Trump doesn't like this pact.
Of course he doesn't.
What my opinion on it is that, sure, I mean, we can have an agreement and people say that it's not effective because it is kind of not monitored. I mean, it's kind of difficult also to monitor industries, right? How many industries can they even monitor? Even if you have a large human resource or whatever, like you can offices and you can have your officials in every country and all the industrial areas. But then again, the thing about climate change is that it has already moved towards it has actually moved towards like the wrong side of it to such an extent that it's going to take a long time to actually reverse it. And people might feel that we're not progressing anywhere, but yeah, I mean, even the little we try might be able to help it in the future. So, but yeah, I just feel it's going to take a long time, and we're just too quick to judge things at this point. I mean, sure, it might not be effective, but then I feel like we're just being too quick to judge because the extent of damage done is already a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, but I think it is at least working towards the whole human society to trying to reduce the harmful effect that climate change causes. So I think that's still a good that's still an advantage, and at least we are still working together. Yeah, even though we can't get any agreement that will effectively slow down the climate change, but yeah, that, as I said, we are starting to work together. Yeah.
That's true. True. I completely agree. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, so about the Paris Climate Accord, right? Like, okay, so all of us like know that the danger of climate change or global warming or whatever. Yeah, but one of the biggest problem is, of course, is the political problem. Like, political problem is not only based on the country that doesn't want to, reduce the emission, reduce your economy because what they can say to the voters. Like most countries are democracies, so they need to answer to the voter. But also in the political side of the proponent of people that want to make climate change the big issue. Like, for example, like nuclear is one of the cleanest sources of energy, but people that usually but people that usually know the Green Party or Greenpeace, something like that, they don't like climate change, but at the same time they don't like nuclear energy. So sometimes this dogmatic and political problem happen in both sides. So it's kind of hard for a human to go to a better plane in addressing the climate change, in my opinion.
That's true. That's a good point on political interference.
I also feel like, oh, sorry, you can go first, Maria.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I just want to say that it's not just the fact that industries have to cut down and the economy is endangered. The Paris Agreement was apparently signed by so many countries, including countries with war, war-torn countries like Syria. So they are not in a position to worry about the environment. They're many of the countries are in a position to worry about their poverty, about simply feeding their population, and so it wasn't an agreement which can be kept up by all the countries, especially third world countries.
Yeah, I kind of agree. A lot of people have this opinion that climate change and global warming is a first world problem, although it's not.
Yes.
Yeah, but a lot of people feel that their countries have more important issues to focus on, like as Maria said. Yeah, it's very, very true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for developed countries, they have to care about their employment first, because there are a lot of people still unemployed. So rather than something will happen in future, they will care about how will people get their food, will people be satisfied towards this government, rather than something will happen like 20 or 30 years ago, 30 years after. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, on that point, I feel like the Paris Agreement is a bit unfair towards the second world or third world countries, the basic countries that are still developing or underdeveloped, because I feel like these bigger countries, or the more developed countries like United States and China, they were the main ones contributing to climate change in the past when they were developing, because when they were developing during all the industrial revolution and whatnot, they were the main contributors of carbon dioxide and thus climate change. And now smaller countries that are still developing, they are pressured into making an agreement where they are still trying to develop, trying to do the most for their the poverty rate in their own respective countries. So I feel like it should be like it's more responsibility towards the more developed nations as compared to the smaller countries that are still developing. They are still trying to focus on other issues than climate change, because it's not their fault. It's not really their fault, but although it should be a global collective effort globally, but I feel like for these smaller countries, some sort of exception should be given to them, and then the bigger or more developed nations should play more and contribute more to this matter, instead of letting all these smaller countries come together and try stop combat climate change. Yeah.
Well, for this, I personally agree, but I heard that in Paris Agreement, there's a policy in which the third world countries, as known as the least developed countries and developing countries, are they're financially subsidized. I heard that this campaign is already ongoing. So in my opinion, yeah, it's important that there are like a lot of nations which need to undergo the development before starting to care about the climate disasters and changes. But since since the campaign is still ongoing about those third world countries, I think it would be more important to expand the increase the amount of the money paid to those countries so that they can undergo the industrial revolution, where they can economically develop and be able to contribute more to Paris Agreement.
Yeah. I agree. But also on that point, I don't think there'll be enough money in this world for them to actually end the poverty cycle in their country. As much money as we can give them, or as much money as we can subsidize, at the end of the day, basically they have to prove to us why this subsidy would be enough to compensate for what they have to get rid of, basically development or using non-renewable energy sources. We have, because I don't at the end of the day, this money can be used for a lot of things. To use it for green technology or renewable energy, it's very hard for you to integrate them in all sectors of industries in these countries, unless the amount of money is substantial, which I don't think it might be. It might seem like a lot, but it will never be enough to end this poverty cycle, maybe in the short term, but in the long run, probably most likely, maybe in a few 10, 20 years, probably. But it still comes to basically that lah. But yeah, I do agree that subsidy can help. It will help a lot, but I don't think it will just be enough to compensate them for what they have to. The trade-off is not enough for me. Yeah.
Okay. So in my put about the third world country have so people say the climate change is affecting more the third world country and poor country so you must remember that the reason why climate change affect more poor country much more negatively because they are poor to begin with, as you see, because poor society is has the less capability to deal with natural disaster like hurricane and all of that rather than rich country. So there is a case to make that we must make this poor country become richer. And as of right now, yes, the poorer country are getting richer. So we are moving. I think we are moving at least in the right direction right now. But as you because I believe that we actually can make everyone in this world a better richer country, because in my at least in bit of my research about the climate change and climate policy and stuff like that, right? If the country become much more richer, some of the problem of climate change can be mitigated or just sidestep immediately. Like for example, the overpopulation problem and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my tip.
About what you said just now, yeah, I agree that there is an ongoing subsidy and there is ongoing subsidy on the third world countries, but I don't think that it is actually going in the right direction because over several decades, actually the economic gap between the first and the third world has been becoming wider and wider, which means that in some ways those first world countries were actually neglecting about the conditions of the less developed countries. And in my opinion, if this problem is not dealt in the right way, then with the climate change, it'll be very hard to get rid of the problem. For example, there are actually some countries like Brazil and Argentina whose economy is roller coaster. They're at the stage of being industrialized, and suddenly their economy collapse in an economical crisis. So yep, there are actually some efforts being put, but I don't think it's going in the right direction. Maybe it's just a adverse circulation of the same event over and over.
Yeah. Sorry, I have to disagree you about that because as of the economic education right now, is the rich are getting richer. There's no doubt about it. But the poor is also getting richer. The rate of the rich getting richer is about like 100%, something like that. But the poorer are getting richer by about 38% like that. Yes, the poorer are getting richer much more slowly than the rich one. But as of right now, all of the economic indicators show that the poorer are getting better off year by year. So yeah, that's the data that I found. Yes, the income gap is widened, but the poorer are also getting richer.
Yeah, I think we actually should help the third world country to be industrialized because most third world countries they depend, or like second world country like Saudi Arabia, they depend on oil, and if the oil if there's suddenly one day there's no oil, the economy will obviously be collapsed. And it's also the same compared to Brazil and Argentina. So they're selling beef and also a lot of agricultural products to the whole world. But yeah, as I said, like sometimes the price will like be lower for a period of time, and the economy is collapsing. So basically, we should help them to industrialize, and which they can produce more things like clothing, cars, and I think it will help the economy more because they are not that rely on natural resources and agriculture stuff. Yeah.
I'm sorry, for the point that the rich is also getting rich as well as the poor is also getting rich. Is this included for 2020 after the economic recession and everything?
Oh, after COVID, it's everyone's got after COVID it's very bad. Yeah, but before this is okay.
Yeah, we're all getting poor in this time. Yeah, but other than like, I think just now somebody has mentioned the political problem, and in my opinion, like, other than like economic situations, the first world countries also have to be responsible for, like, they need to take the responsibility for the political problems. And I believe that it's actually coming from what somebody mentioned, like, it is true that, yeah, poor is getting richer and so is the richer, but the gap is actually widening, and that might cause a political problem. And for example, that's why like some of the socialist nations in the 1990s have collapsed and they have changed to democracy because they're like yearning for the better quality of life in the first world countries. And actually, a lot of places around the world, like Syria, as what one person mentioned, and yeah, they're actually undergoing a political turmoil. And why not the first world countries, in a pretense of supporting them, why don't they just stop like giving them sanctions for no reasons? It has happened several times in the history. Like, I know there are like some examples like North Korea and Iran, but other than that, there are like some other first world countries which just don't do like enough investment in places like Africa, and they rather cause like political problems in like Middle East. Like, let's take back to Iraq War and what's going on in Middle East. Like, those political problems have happened because like the first world, they just want to take the oil rather than just help those countries if they're like if they actually need some help.
Yeah, so I think the main problem is America and the Western countries are trying to promote democracy, but when the dictatorship Saddam was being removed, they didn't try to rebuild new Iraq. They just settle their army there, and they just see Iraq people killing each other and not helping them to settle a new government, to create a new efficient government. Yeah, so actually their life is even worse than time in Saddam. So that's a problem of the Western democracy. So they didn't try to help them to rebuild their nation.
Sorry, I like to talk about geopolitics, politics, all of that. But how did our discussion about Paris climate go into Iraq war? Sorry.
I would like to say that even though I mostly don't agree that the Paris agreement was not effective, okay, it wasn't effective mostly, I feel, but then at the same time, it is surprising that there were many third world countries or superpopulated countries like India and China. They started investing more in renewable sources of energy because of this agreement. But it was also funny that there were countries like Germany, which had already been super advanced in technology and had always been investing in renewable sources. They tried, but they couldn't keep up. Their carbon output increased even after the agreement. It just practically it just wasn't happening. So I would like to say it did inspire. Maybe this agreement did inspire certain countries in many ways, even though it did not reach the end goal.
Yeah. So one thing about Germany, so okay, talk about the politics of the nuclear energy, right? So before this, Germany actually used nuclear energy, but then after Chernobyl happened, there's been a huge public pressure to phase out their nuclear production, their nuclear energy production. So what they did is they used renewable, but the problem with renewable is it's very it's very so they produce the energy when you actually didn't need it. Like for example, like right now it's raining in Malaysia. So assuming that you use solar energy, now you cannot get solar energy because it's raining. So what happened is for Germany to actually offset the energy imbalance from the because the renewable energy is not efficient enough, they actually use more coal, which actually increase the air pollution in Germany. So I see that why people like renewable energy, because yeah, it is good, but I'm very not certain about how renewable energy can be used because of the Germany problem. What happened in Germany?
Yeah, and also I think the punishment for Paris agreement is not hard enough. So they basically just to reduce the carbon dioxide. But when they found you are not reducing the carbon dioxide, and yes, it still increase. It's still increasing. The Paris agreement can only using negotiation, things like that. But that won't do much on the countries that doesn't want to reduce the carbon dioxide. Yeah, so I think the punishment they should make it a bit more harsh, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's because it wasn't there was no legal punishment for not abiding with the Paris Agreement, and it's mostly just political pressures between the nations among themselves.
And I don't think it's also very wise of them to impose a harsh punishments. I think it's more towards the like Maria said, political pressure on whether maybe reduce trades for these countries that refuse to abide with climate change. I don't think an actual punishment can be done. Like, what punishment can you actually get make the countries, because it also affects basically the sovereignty of the country itself. Like, they have a choice, they call their own shots. So they can easily pull out like what Donald Trump did, which is to application to pull out from the agreement itself. So imposing a punishment, I don't think it's possible. But political pressure, then again, for these bigger countries, would they actually get pressured politically? Like America again, Donald Trump, I don't think he cares about what other countries think of the United States. He'll just do whatever he feels like is best for the country, and that's enough. But this will mostly affect the smaller and developing countries, because they are the ones who are dependent on the trade, dependent on the all this diplomacy that's happening between countries. That is how they are still going and still choosing to abide by the Paris Agreement. But when we talk about larger carbon emission nations like US, China, India, yes, they are taking actions. But in the case where they are not, what are we actually going to do to them? Or like, if the smaller countries are not abiding by this Paris Agreement, what are the actual punishments that we can impose on these countries? I don't think that's fair. Basically, I don't think that's fair, basically. Yeah, so I think that's why it's not working, because maybe it's just an agreement. It's not a rule. It's not a like something definitive. It's just something everybody says. Okay, I'm gonna try to reduce my carbon emissions, and we'll see how that goes. Everybody tries. Whether or not they try enough, it's a different question. But to get a solid result out of this agreement, I think it's really not possible, because it's just an agreement. Yeah.
I have a
I
slide.
personally agree. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go.
Okay, so I personally agree with Dixon's idea that imposing whatever like sanction or reducing trade or like political pressure is not a wise choice. But in my opinion, why not like foster education in the countries they're not really keeping up with Paris Agreement, because it's mostly us who throw the waste, and we waste a lot of energy like electricity and heat and water. And like in countries like China and India, yeah, very hard to like take control of over billions of people. Like those countries are colossal compared to us, Malaysia, Indonesia, also, and according to the slide that I showed just now, yeah, education should be very effective in those cases, like those countries, some of the most like polluted ones, because that means that education will be able to teach lots of people, and by the number of the people, the effort on Paris Agreement is likely to take place in a much wider scale. So I don't think that imposing is a good idea.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view on the punishment view, though. I feel like if all the countries have a mutual understanding of the consequences that climate change is going to bring and how it's going to impact human beings as a species, then I don't think we actually need to impose a punishment, because all of us will be punished anyway at the end if we don't abide by it. But then that only comes after a very greater understanding of the whole issue by all the countries and their ministers and political parties involved. And so I think there's no point having a punishment if we are all going to be punished later on. But yeah, there needs to be an understanding of it to actually implement this.
Yeah.
Just now your picture was a bit unclear.
I think what Vertika mainly mentioned was the punishment is not ideal, especially when everyone will get punished at the end of the day because of their inadequate efforts towards combating climate change. So it's just about forming that mutual understanding that these are the consequences of climate change. This is what it's all about. Like actually, it's just everybody understanding the consequences and then working towards combating this from actually happening. But what other I want to mention? You guys can go ahead first. I'll think first. I forgot.
Yeah, but every country have to understand that in the end we will face very harsh consequences, just like World War I and World War II. Like when they starting the war, they never thought the war will go this long, and there are so many people dying from this war, these two wars. So basically, if they can't realize, I think punishment is still better to help them to realize, rather than in the end everyone getting punished. And so on.
So to put this like in a debate context, right? So opposition would simply say it's just not working out because these bigger countries, they are not vulnerable to political pressure like smaller countries, and they are the ones who have this responsibility to play a role, in actually combating climate change. But clearly it's not working out given what Donald Trump's action on pulling out from this Paris Agreement. And then this is what opposition will mainly talk about, this on how it's just not doing anything because it's just an agreement. It's not an actual it's not something that is that each country is make it compulsory to do by each country. But then side government can easily say that this is a step towards combating climate change, because the first step is for there to be diplomacy between countries, and there to be a formation of mutual understanding that these are the consequences of climate change, and at least under side government where the Paris Agreement exists, that there is already a measure taken for there to be, because there's a lot of countries that sign up for this Paris Agreement. So diplomacy and this people just consenting to this agreement is already the first step towards that. Second step is the effort. Even if the effort does not show as much, as significant results as there could have be, but if we are able to minus or lower the carbon emission rate by 1% or 2% or lower than that, at least under our side, there's something already being done about that. At least that 1% is already the carbon emission rates are already being decreased. So this is what side government would say, and then they will question opposition, because you're against this, what form of alternative are you going to propose to Paris Agreement? Because under our side, we believe that at least the Paris Agreement is able to, incentivize, so that countries are more incentivized to put or invest more in renewable energy, and because of that, they're able to reduce carbon emission rates by 1% or 2%. At least the effort is there, and this, first of all, this understanding or the awareness is already achieved under the Paris Agreement. Secondly, is that the efforts are already being taken, whether or not it's by smaller countries and big countries may not be as significant, but at least on the government side where Paris Agreement exists, that there is already, although already a reduction, may it be as little as possible, it would still be better than if there was no Paris Agreement in the first place. So this is what side government can say on this topic. But side opposition, of course, they will have more to say. Side government will just have to play that, saying at least we did something instead of your side. Yeah, that's what side government would mostly do in this debate now, basically.
Yeah, man, the statistics show the greenhouse gas increased 2% from 2017 to 2018, and the pact was signed by 2015, but it was activated by 2016. Yeah, so I think that's what the opposition would say, like, because it didn't help. Yeah, the gas is still increasing by 2%, which is a very large amount.
Yeah, opposition can definitely say that. So what do you think government's response can be towards this, or any other points that maybe the proposing side can actually say about this, instead of playing that pity card? At least we tried. Yeah, what else could they say? Also, on the other hand, side opposition could, they could go the hard stance. They could just say, screw combating climate change. We're not going to make any efforts towards combating climate change at all. What we're going to do is change usual economic activities. Actually, a motion that I've debated back in high school, which is that this house believes that this house would rather adapt to climate change than combat it. Yeah, so this is also a possible stance that side opposition might take, although it's very rare, but there is a chance that they will just say, screw combating climate change. We see that there is no significant progress. If like a country believes that combating climate change is the right way to go, then it's up to them. Because it's their nation, it's their leaders. Whatever they want to do, they can do. But we shouldn't make it a point to combat climate change. What we should do is we should just adapt to the adversities of climate change, which is also a point, because like all this while we've been mentioning all the negative consequences of climate change, but none of us actually talked about what are these negative consequences and how is this actually going to affect us. Maybe there's a way we can actually adapt to it, or invest our money in actually adapting rather than combating. Maybe it's cheaper for us to adapt rather than combat climate change in the long run. So it will be a whole different debate, but there is a possibility that opposition might talk about this. Yeah, instead of combating, why combat? We can just adapt. Yeah, but what do you guys think? Anyone? Nothing to say.
Go on.
I think that apart from using the pity card, as you said, that at least we're doing something. The government side could also present some examples, like Maria mentioned, of India and China. People are now kind of moving towards investing in sustainable resources, and kind of give these little examples. Like they might even be like influenced by the Paris Agreement, but if they give any examples going on from like 2016 forward, then I think they can kind of say that it was completely with the Paris Agreement. So yeah, I mean, I'm not telling you to lie in your debates, but like if a slight tweak to your argument works, then yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Adam, you say anything?
Yeah, so like one of the stipulation of the climate Paris Accord is to what they call, so most nations, like they have a phase, or what they call the baby boomer phase, where there will be like high growth of wealth and high growth of people. Like in America during the 60 up to 80 or something. So like one of the premise in the what they call the Paris Climate Accord. So they want to speed up the growth. So the growth phase will be much more shorter, but at the same time it be much more better. Like for example, in India, so for example in India, like they do invest in renewable energy, but at the same time in India also like build like a lot of coal power plant to fuel the growth. So the logic in the Paris climate change is to quickly growth, and then after like the country is already rich enough to start to transition into renewable or other source of energy that is better for the environment. And also another thing that the government can say is, so that's one of the things that government can say. And another thing the government can say is like it's like the best thing that we can done as of right now. Like for example, like the opposition might say, oh, why didn't we put why did we put like fine tariff and fine for people that do not meet their criteria? Well, we can just say that it is because of the political climate, like especially in this especially as right now, the increase of nationalism and identitarianism, all of that. People don't like the idea of world government stuff like that. So I think Paris climate accord, it is not the what you call the ideal solution, but it is best that the people can do right now. So we can say that. What do you think?
Yeah, true, very true. Yeah. Yeah, probably the best we can do, especially like I don't know, like I'm just taking the COVID context into it. Like by now I feel I don't think anybody's like priority is climate change or global warming at this point. At this point, everyone's just worried about keeping themselves safe and having enough resources for their country to treat their patients. So I think if this debate happened in this context, it would be like completely biased towards the opposition side. But yeah, I mean, if the whole COVID context did not exist, then yeah, that point is very valid. That it's probably the best we can do.
Yeah, and I think one of the main way government can step forward for this type of motion is to see the alternatives that side opposition brings up and to always question on whether that alternative would work or not. Whatever it may be, like Adam said, maybe impose some sort of tariff or like reduce trades or some sort of actual punishments toward these countries. Side government there's always something to say in regards to punishments being imposed, especially onto smaller countries where this would not be their main priority as of this moment. But yeah, so side government's main way is to mainly talk about the low side, or like all the negative of the alternative that side opposition will bring up, because they have to come up with an alternative. If they don't come up with an alternative, then they're basically saying that we shouldn't do anything at all about this. So at the end of the day, government still wins. So it all comes down to what alternative does opposition bring up and whether or not it's good. But of course, when it comes to something an alternative, there's a lot to say. There's a lot to debate upon, because this is just an idea that side opposition brings up. I don't think they'll bring up like like actual like premise or actual idea that is already like very well thought of. There's always going to be loopholes that you can find from side government, and try to attack them on those points and just tell them how will it be better than Paris Agreement, because Paris Agreement, there's already facts, there's already examples of countries taking initiatives in order to combat climate change. It's because their side is still an idea, is still fiction. You're still able to tackle them down on that, and because they I don't think they'll be able to like actually solidly prove to us how this will actually work under their side. So government will play on that, basically just going on against the alternative brought up by opposition. Yeah, so that's, I think, the one way the government can actually salvage the debate and possibly win the motion.
Any more inputs, anyone?
Maybe,
Yeah, maybe.
I'm sorry, sure, go on.
Okay, so maybe we should compare the statistic. So from 2018, compare the growth of carbon dioxide to 2014 to 15. If it is actually decreasing, or yeah, if it's actually decreasing, then it shows Paris Agreement actually do a lot. And we also should find other government statistics, see if they found more money in the renewable industry. If they do, then the Paris Agreement is still working, because they are putting more money into the renewable energy industry. And as I say, China's renewable industry have been increased 2% after they signed the Paris Agreement. So yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. Also, one more way you can. Yeah, go ahead.
To some extent, Paris Agreement is taking place because, I mean, other than that, it was only founded in 2015, and we're still like lacking in technologies to even make full use of the renewable resources. We actually still like depend upon the unrenewable resources like coal and gas. So I think it would be too early to make a judgment on Paris Agreement right now. It's only been 5 years. And maybe like the success in reducing the carbon dioxide rate between 2014 and 15 is a good start. So it's something that we should all keep in check of.
Yep, I agree. And also, maybe one way you guys can play around this is you can just say that this statistics, if in the case where they show that the carbon emission rates are actually increasing, you can just say that the statistics are taking consideration of all the countries that take part in all the countries basically. But you also have to look at it from like country by country that perspective, because if there's already like reduced emission rates of a particular country or a few countries, but just because that other countries are not doing their part, it may look like it's increasing. But if you look at it by like a country to country basis and see how they are actually, trying to reduce the carbon emission rates, that is where we can actually see how this agreement actually works. It's just because some other countries, they don't play their part in combating. That is why they are producing a larger amount of carbon dioxide. This is why that it doesn't show off as well in statistics. But if you look at it, like you can just bring out a few countries that are actually doing, they are actually taking initiatives and tell them, these countries carbon emission rates decreased to this from this particular year. This is how you can, make it seem like, oh yeah, maybe it's true. If a few countries are able to do this, maybe it's just what is needed is just more, again, political pressure or more endorsement and heavy emphasis on Paris Agreement, because it's just, now we feel like it's just something that is set on 2015 and that's it. It's just an agreement that was made 5 years ago and that was just about it. But maybe they can just talk about how there can be more emphasis and just, more consistent updates and whatnot. Basically just increasing the emphasis on Paris Agreement. Maybe that will decrease the carbon emission rate of all the countries in the future. Yeah, maybe just don't look at it as a whole, but look at it in country by country, or just go deeper and look how it actually affects industries in certain countries and see if it actually works. Yeah.
Yeah, and we should not just see the result, we should see the improvement. Like if they put this more renewable energy industry in their priority, so promoting people to build renewable energy industry, did they put it in the priority? If they put it in the priority, or just move or just make it more important, then I think the pact is still working.
Yeah, definitely. For example, maybe increased allocation of budget towards green technology. There's already a sign of government taking initiative, to widen this industry of green technology. So yeah, just don't look. Maybe government can just say, don't judge it based on the statistics. Maybe look at it deeper into the initiatives that each state or each nation is doing, or you can go go a deeper, like how industries are affected by this agreement, maybe positively or negatively. The negative aspects can be used by side opposition, of course. Yeah, so that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just from a source I just found. So in September 19, actually, Norwegian Energy and China, they work together to promote offshore wind renewable energy industry in China, both China and Europe. So that can be seen as a cooperation after the Paris Treaty being signed, Paris Agreement being signed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the government should basically touch upon the examples that we have witnessed after 2016, and the opposition should just propose alternative solutions that they think might actually be better than the Paris Agreement, and then the government can go ahead and say, I don't think it's the right. It's not the right solution. Paris Agreement is still working, and it kind of goes back and forth that way. Yeah. Basically, when they actually put out solutions, right, you have to the side government can actually look upon the practicality of implementing that solution. So if they say something like, imposing punishments, just say, I don't think that's very practical. It's going to affect third world countries who actually want to carry out trade. Their main source of income is trade. So I think whenever I debate, I look upon the practicality of the solution proposed and just attack it that way, because there's basically no counter argument they can have to that argument. Like, if it's not practical, it's just not practical. Yeah. Any more suggestions?
What else?
By the way, I would really encourage you all, at least those who are present here, to take part in any one of the debates happening next week. Since, like, you all have debated over here with us, kind of brainstormed on a topic. Not exactly debated, but kind of brainstormed on something. It's really nice to actually hear your thoughts. So the debate is basically to There's not much of a difference actually. Basically, you present your point and it goes back to like it's going right now. So it's not very different. So don't be scared about speaking in front of an audience. But yeah, at least take part once the debate's happening next week.
Mhm.
And I guess we don't have any more suggestions, opinions, arguments on the floor. We can end this meeting, but again, as a reminder, we really encourage you all to take part in the events happening next week. And don't worry about the training group. We're going to have mock debate sessions for the Macau debate, especially this Friday. And for the other debates, we'll kind of be giving you a training or a briefing session where you get into the rules. So the debate one is very easy. It doesn't go in that huge drama of British parliamentary. It's its own format, and you don't basically have to go into the fine tuning of anything. So if you're very nervous about Asian parliamentary, all of that, take part in debate. But if you're not, because those are just formats anyway, you can get a grasp of them by PowerPoint. And they're also available on our website, and I think Maria can email them to all our members just in case they have any reference. So don't get fixated on the formats. Just kind of come here to have fun and set your points. Don't worry about even having a proper flow. As long as you have your points that are solid, or whatever.
Mhm.
Okay.
I have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if you heard the debating coaching session last week, Yan Cheng, is it Yan Cheng? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
She mentioned that the best way to start debating is for you to take a role first. So basically, you just say that you're a first speaker, and from now on, you're going to train as first speaker. So I feel like after this, you guys can think like which position would you work best in, and then you be fixed towards that position, so that in next time if we do have future debates, you guys would assume that role immediately, and then we'll see how far you progress from there onwards, especially those debating against Macau or the debaton. So what you guys should do is just assume a role so you know what you want. So maybe we can, for our active debaters, yes, we might not, there's not as many people here as we would like, but for the few of our active debaters, I encourage them to take up a role and then improve with that role instead of like changing roles every single debate. So it's better if we take up a role, and once you take up a role, maybe in the future form a team already. So if you're already very comfortable with one person or another debater in the club, you guys can always be in a team, so that you can improve on not only your um, debating skills, but also the dynamics and the communication between teams. And then with that, only then we can start thinking about sending all of you to for debate competitions, because it's not cheap. Basically, external debate competitions can cost quite a lot, so we have to be very careful on who we select to be in to participate in these competitions. So we want like a team that has good dynamics, that are able to communicate well, and that are able to actually debate properly, and they know what their positions are. They know that okay, I'm first speaker, so I'm gonna assume first speaker for the entire debate competition. Yes, there might be changes, but we want a team that is already solid and that knows how to and that can actually debate well, basically. Yeah. So this is just a tip for all of you. Just assume a role, and then try find someone else who is also a frequent debater in this club, and then talk to them. You can even approach like me or Vertica, Adam, Deepan, or any of the other core committees, Maria. Approach any of us if you feel like you want to learn from them or you want to work together with them. Go ahead. I'm very open. You can always contact me. We'll always be there to help. I can offer advice and whatnot. So yeah, so that's just an advice from me from this point forward as you continue debating. Mm.
So I think, okay, feel free to turn on your camera so we can take a nice picture to put on our social media if you're comfortable. But yeah, otherwise feel free to leave. And I really hope I see you all debating next week. So yeah, you could turn on your cameras, please do that.
Guess it's only both of us.
Yeah. Okay, so I've taken enough pictures. Okay. Hi, Maria is here. Okay. Adam is here. Cool. Don't worry about how you look, guys, honestly.
It's normal.
Yeah, it's not like I spent 1 hour just preparing, putting makeup for this session. I didn't do any of that. I'm literally wearing PJs if you saw me.
Oh, Suba, don't have to be shy. You've been
Yeah,
debating for two rounds already, two debates
exactly.
already.
Okay,
It'll be much better if we get to meet face to face. So there's no option for you to hide your face.
exactly. Okay, cool. So I've taken a picture of all of us. Feel free to leave. Go ahead, have your dinner, whatever part of the world you're in, lunch, dinner, whatever it is.
Thank you so much, guys. It was a really useful session with all the tips and tricks.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Maria.
attending.
Thanks for attending. See you guys.
See you. Oh, Vertica, can I have a word on something after
Yeah.
I really like? Yeah. Bye bye. I think I can stay too. Okay. Okay, so on the debate on, right? I was thinking that because we have wait, 4 teams, right? So basically I was thinking that will the certificates you give to the participants, um like for example those who lost in the first 2 days, we can just give them a third place certificate. Do you think it's fair? And then um for the last two teams, we'll give them a first place for the winner and second place for the, at least there will be like a position, then they'll be more incentivized to join, because they'll be like, even if they lose, they'll still be third place. So it's actually still quite good for you to have a certificate. We have third place for the debate on in there. Yeah, probably something we can raise to EWB on this. Just a thought just now, because we've noticed that not that many participants.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. You should really just send a text on the EWB group, and I'm sure nobody will have any problem with it because we were gonna make certificates anyway. So just send this on the EWB group, and that shouldn't be a problem. Great idea, by the way. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really think of this before. And great session today, by the way.
Yeah, thank you too. Really hope we can debate though in the future.
Yeah. I'm really not sure about the engagement coming in next week because for Macau only one person signed up, and that's Maria, and Suba signed up for the debate-thon. So even for the Macau collab, it'll be a hassle getting debaters. So I'm going to text on the junior committee group today to kind of
Yeah.
persuade them to join. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I can always I think I can debate on the Macau debate if nobody else is going to debate. Yeah.
Yeah, please do.